Hey everybody, this is Professor Lilly, and so today I'm just going to do a short lecture on Chapter 7 and a kind of condensed version and an overview of what you're supposed to be doing this week. Um, I'm not going to put my face in there just so we can have more real estate for me to show you the PowerPoint and everything on the screen, but I will double check when this is over and make sure that my voice is allowed for you to hear. So this is the celebrity week, and really, like I said before, it's not about the study of celebrity so much, but using that as a lens to think about the emergence and development of popular culture. So what I'm going to do real quick is I'm going to do the video, and then I'm going to go in a little bit more detail. The assignment for this week, the main kind of tool in at least in Moodle for this is going to be this discussion forum here, where you're going to post your results from your week-long research. This is a project that you can do together or by yourself. And this week, we're doing a week-long research project, and then the next week here, actually three in a row here. And what I would like you to do is that if you can please, now if you don't do this, it's okay, but if you do it in a group, I'd rather you do all three of them together in a group. So people you're used to working with, and that obviously you have their contact information to be able to talk to them, FaceTime, text, whatever, to be able to coordinate. And that's just to make it easier for me to grade, because when I see two people's names, um, these three are all going to have either the first two are going to have a grade together, or all three. I need to decide. Originally, before we went to all online, they were all going to be one graded, but I might split it up into two. But so at least for the first two, you're going to have to be in the same group. So if you do the first one for Chapter 7 and Celebrity by yourself, you're going to have to do the next one next week by yourself, or if you do it in a group or two. Um, I don't want it to be any bigger than a group of three. And if you do a group of three, whatever you're doing, obviously I expect a little bit more work. Granted, the coordination of a group itself takes time. So if I don't expect you to do three times as much as a single person, but there should be uh, examples of the fact that more than one person is working on this project. And with that in mind, I'm just going to note that, and I'll send an email about this at the end of the week, but the main thing for next week is to read this article here, Online Fan Communities as Religion. And I will give you, there's going to be some reading from chapter 4, and I'll put on here, and I'll send it out in the email, a little bit more specific about what I want you to read in chapter 4. I don't expect you to read the whole thing, um, but it will be browsing through a couple topics in that, and then starting to read or reading the whole Online Fan Communities as Religion, and you will be using that a lot in the assignment for next week. But let's get back to this week. So, um, I'm going to start with the lecture that I've condensed. In the chapter, a couple things that I want you to focus on if you haven't read it yet. Just read through this beginning part where it talks about what celebrity is. In my PowerPoint slide, I'm going to start with this where Andy Warhol is talking about getting your 15 minutes, and kind of why is it that he's saying that in the 1960s, and it's even not 16 minutes, I said that 15 minutes of fame, and how it's even more applicable today. Um, Read about the definition, the difference between fame and celebrity. I think I have it highlighted here. Um, and the thing that I want to focus on the most about the difference is, or you can think about someone like a president, for example. So President Obama. So the frame would be the things that they've done, the achievements, why they got the attention of the public. But then the celebrity is more the use of mass communication for people to identify with their public image and for it to be spread all over. And so that's why the chapter focuses on celebrity, because it's about how the development of different mass communication technologies have led to the extension and the possibilities for more and more people to be celebrities, and how that has changed over time. And so with that in mind, now there's a lot of history reading, and a lot about like specific people, examples of how they became celebrities. And I know for some of you are kind of not as much into that reading. If you enjoy it, then please do. But I want you to focus on these mass communication technologies and what they mean, and that would be the invention of mass celebrity. And then browse through the triumph of entertainment and the invention of movie stars. And again, this is just giving you more historical context about the rise of different technologies and what they meant for the growth of popular culture in society. And then come into mass mediated celebrity, which again focuses on technologies. Okay, so let's go to my PowerPoint real quick. So, yeah, so what did Andy Warhol mean about his 15 minutes? So think about it in the 1960s and what mass communication technologies are prevalent at the time. And especially television is really starting to hit its stride. More and more living rooms in America at that point have televisions. The radio is completely commercialized, and probably every single person in America who's older than like 5 is listening to the radio. And then also vinyl records are starting to become very popular. And as well as at that point, certainly magazines and newspapers had already solidified themselves for um, many decades. And so what he said by everyone will get their 15 minutes, he kind of recognized that these technologies are emerging to the point where even if you only got into a magazine article or got interviewed for by a reporter or were at it on the TV for just a little bit, that more and more these mass communication technologies are picking up the broader spectrum of society. And the main thing I want you to think of in when thinking about this module and this chapter is how that has changed through the different generations. So today, for example, thinking about YouTubers, I think it's even probably much easier for any one person, if they really wanted to and had the technology, which is much more prevalent than it used to be able to become a celebrity, or at least to engage in the media industry. So if you come down to this bottom question here, if you think about the differences, for example, between the telegraph and the telephone, okay, so more and more the companies that are creating and producing these technologies realize that if you create something that is expensive and only a very small number of people are going to be using it, even if you sell that for a lot of money, you're not going to make nearly as much money if you're creating a technology that's specifically designed for working class people to be able to buy it and use it, because then you would be having millions of people buy your technology. So think about the difference between the telegraph and the telephone. The telegraph is a very specific technology for sending a message from one place to another, and it was very controlled, right? You had to go to an office and pay money to the person who actually operates the telegraph to send it to somewhere else. So it's definitely it's more like a one-to-one type technology. Certainly the telephone is too, whereas the telephone, however, is designed for a similar function, but designed to be in pretty much everyone's household, right? So similar where we had the first large cameras that were used for film companies. Again, very specialized equipment to be used only in specialized circumstances, as opposed to when the first personal photography cameras started coming out. In order for the vast majority of, again, like working class, middle class type households by the I'd say, um, 40s and 50s and certainly 60s be able to have that technology. And then think about like a TV studio, like maybe when I was a kid in the 1980s. You would have to go to like the local television access to be able to produce a television show, and that equipment was obviously very expensive and exclusive. Um, as opposed to the technology we have now, where a person who wanted to be a YouTuber could have a personal studio in their house. Um, the price point is definitely lower, and just the proliferation of those technologies allow for that to happen. So the example that's used in the textbook is a couple different ones, but certainly P.T. Barnum and what he did with Jenny Lind. He brought her from Europe, where she was somewhat well known as a singer, but not known in the United States at all. And so his innovation was the use of advertising, public relations in newspapers, magazines, pamphlets, like posters put around town, um, town criers. He would pay people to go and to spread information. He would use little advertisements before films to so people at the time would go to see the very first films that we being produced, like shorts, silent films, and he was one of the first people to put little advertisements between or before those to let people know what was going on. So at that point, it was fairly remarkable for tens of thousands of people to show up to see Jenny Lind when they had never heard of her. So his use of the mass media in that sense was truly revolutionary. And then in the textbook also talks about George Washington and Daniel Boone. Washington's fame was not necessarily the good type of fame until near the end of his life. So he was widely criticized by the people who knew about him in the Revolutionary War, and certainly a lot of people in a lot of leaders were trying to get rid of him as the general. But later on, wasn't until he had already been president near the end of his life that people started realizing what a huge role he played in basically not letting the British have a decisive victory and stop the revolution before it could really get going. And then Daniel Boone is used an example because he lots of aspects of his life were lots of aspects of what his fame were, and then his celebrity were completely fabricated. So even during his life, there was a biography written that completely overblew a lot of the stuff that he actually did. And then this is something that most of you would not have seen, but like it was in reruns, the Daniel Boone Disney television series when I was a kid. It was, I think, produced in the '60s. So even for me, when I saw it, I was thinking about how low the production quality was and how kind of old school it would have seemed to me in the '80s. But Disney completely took his celebrity and kind of did a reboot of it. And so if any of you went down to Disney World in Orlando or even in the California one, there's a lot of stuff at Fort Wilderness and things like that that kind of harken back to how when they were really using him as one of their vehicles. So the main point here is to get into like a better understanding of popular culture and how a group of texts, I'm looking here at the bottom, can help a person or a thing like a franchise become famous and widespread. And so the text might be in one medium, like let's say a song or an album by an up and coming group, or a film by a filmmaker, or a television series. But through the media that we have today, like social media, websites, YouTube, they are extended in other media. So even if they're mainly known for being in one medium, whether it's a book or music or film, nowadays all the different media that we have kind of proliferize over them. Um, at first, intentionally. So if you were working on a film and you had the budget for it, then you would certainly hire people to develop advertising and public relations in social media to spread the word about your film. But after, once it becomes the point where something really becomes famous, then you have the fans and people talking about the celebrity or about the cultural text that's becoming famous, and they are almost are doing all the work for you. So it kind of takes on a life of its own. Okay, so again, the main point, and one of the things I want you to think about is the transition between the different types of mass communication technologies and how they make different types of celebrity possible, right? So we have Barnum becoming famous, and the people that he made famous using magazines and newspapers. He was also one of the first innovators in the uses of photography, and so he was one of the first people to actually hire lots of photographers to take pictures of his animals, for example, and to use those to capture people's imagination, as well as the radio for advertising and public relations. Um, and one thing we can think about is what's the difference between that and then today, YouTube, Instagram, and whether or not we think it's easier to create celebrity or to become one yourself. Now, the difficulty with that, if we go into major shifts in the cultural industries, is that let me fast forward um, to movies and television. Um, in the mid, if we're thinking about, for example, celebrities like Marilyn Monroe, Elvis, and Johnny Carson, thinking about movies and television. So this is like the mid 19th century, like 1950s, with television really starting to 1950s and 60s television really starting to take on its own, and with people like Elvis. He was very a visual person, right? Like he didn't write most of his own music. He had a lot of record contracts, but still the fact that he was getting on television and people were seeing him and the visuality of his performance really kind of allowed him to take off. Um, and so at that point, the percentage of people in the United States who would see Marilyn Monroe, Elvis, Johnny Carson was a huge percentage. Think about the fact that we only really have like three television networks at the time. So maybe you might have had three or four choices if you were a kid turning on the television. And so the percentage of people that would see Elvis if he was on a live concert, or watch Johnny Carson, or see a Marilyn Monroe movie was a huge percentage of the population, right? So if we go back to my earlier question here at the bottom, um, today the technology is certainly easier, right? So if you invested a lot of time and energy and you had something you were passionate about, and wanted to become, for example, a YouTuber in that kind of aspect, whether it's talking about fashion or talking about following celebrities or a particular type of video game, whatever your kind of specialty would be, the kind of numbers, what would be the numbers that you would say, okay, now I'm becoming more well known? Would it be tens of thousands of people, like 100,000 views, or 100,000 followers, which would be more significant, or getting into the millions, right? You would, I think, consider yourself pretty successful. Certainly, YouTube would be paying you money, but just in terms of the sheer numbers of people and the percentage, you would actually be, considering how many millions of people there are in the United States now, and billions on the planet. You're actually only getting a very small kind of niche market that you're kind of a celebrity of, compared to um, so Marilyn Monroe, again, Elvis and Johnny Carson, who they would be the vast majority of Americans would know who they are, or were at that time. So let me go back. So again, thinking about major shifts in technology and also society. So again, I want to re-emphasize the term cultural industries, which basically means all the industries, the communication industries associated with making our culture as we know it today. So that's all the film and entertainment industries, television, music, books. Um, that would also include cultural industries, would include advertising and public relations. And again, this is perhaps the major industry in the United States today. So a lot of the examples from the book, gotta go back there, are again historical and trying to make the point of how different technologies allow for the broadening of audiences and globalization. So, for example, with the Beatles, if the Beatles happen to come along before a technology like radio or television, or just the ability to be able to go across the ocean to be able to market and play their music, then they don't become the type of globally recognized phenomena that we recognize them for today. Um, Another thing they talk about in the book is the shift from people being composers or creators of any kind of cultural text to being performers. Certainly, Elvis is a great example of that. I mean, he didn't write a lot of his um, music, but his emphasis on performance that really captured the imagination of hundreds of thousands of people was especially in the medium of film and television, allowed for his celebrity to explode. Um, so let's get some specific examples, and what I want you to think about are the generational differences. What are the differences between what things would have been like when your grandparents were around versus your parents versus for you today? Um, in the music industry, um, again, it's a lot about technology. So before the Industrial Revolution, all you really had was the instruments itself, and people passing along songs from person to person. So certainly cultures keeping types of music alive and people creating new types, but there's no technology per se until we audio technologies such as the production of vinyl records, and then certainly the radios or the radio to bring. And at that point, so you'd have to bring a performer into the studio, the radio studio, and have them play over the air. And that's the point when the industry side of it comes in, and you have record labels realizing that they can sign these people that are being played on the radio, and they can also have them begin to start touring. So for my generation, the big technology would have been cassette tapes and CDs. So this area right here, um, and that's how I would have listening to the radio and then going out and buying a CD or a cassette tape is how I would have interacted with music at the time. And then when I was, let's say, like an older teenager or in my 20s, is when the kind of digital revolution starts to happen. And people at that point, I remember when I got my first kind of large console computer that I was able to put a CD in and rip the music into MP3s that I can then share with my students, or rather my friends. So this is a huge shift, and this technology allowed for lots of things to happen in terms of new bands coming along because the CDs were controlled by large record companies, but also it completely threatened the sales of those CDs and was a sea change really in how the industry works. So today we can think about how social media allows for new modes of sharing. So if you are a band today, then you pretty much have to be marketing yourself as through social media and hoping that your fans are sharing your music and sharing information about you as well. And then in the audiovisual world. So certainly, just having the visual aspect created a whole new way for people to become celebrities and to be known about. So I mean, I don't think some people like Marilyn Monroe or Elvis would really be if through the medium of radio, for example, if that was the only thing that was available, then what they were able to offer in performance would never have carried through. Um, and again, thinking about social media as an extension even further. So today, like if any kind of film series, again, you would have to hire people to share your content and to preview your content, promo your content through social media. Um, let's see, did I get to everything I wanted to say? So what I want you to do, again, I tried to go through those relatively quickly, just because I think an extended lecture would be pretty boring. Okay, so imaginary social relationships. This is the essay that I asked you to read for this week. So, and again, you're going to have to engage this essay more deeply. And let me, just in case you don't know where it is, let me go there. Right here. And you're going to have to engage that a little bit more deeply than chapter 7. And so I'll get into this week's research challenge. Okay, so I'm calling it the Celebrity Social Media Research Assignment. So what I want you to do, again, choose your groups. You can do this by yourself or at a maximum of 3 people. Again, you're going to have to coordinate to do that together. Is I want you to choose one celebrity, 1 or 2 celebrities, per person in your group. And you have to have at least 2 because I want you to do, even if you're by yourself, and that's just because I want you to be able to compare and contrast the different uses of social media by those celebrities. So I would choose people perhaps that are different. And I want you to follow them. Now, it could be someone you've already are following, and by celebrity, I mean pretty broadly. So this could be like the classic like movie star celebrity or music star celebrity. It doesn't necessarily have to be someone who's like huge, like Beyonce type huge, right? So I talked about YouTubers. So you could, I would consider someone who's a YouTuber who's well known in whatever kind of genre of media that you enjoy. Well, then that person's a celebrity in that particular kind of little niche area. So you could definitely. Now it has to be someone who's usually using a variety of social media. So this person has to be using at least 2 types so that you can again compare them. Like how do they use Twitter different than Instagram, or how do they use YouTube different than Instagram or Twitter or Facebook? Um, and so whatever types of social media they are using, I want you to follow them and take some, take notes about how they're using it. I want you to get some screen captures. So you can just screen capture something that's interesting so you could make it a photo and put it into your blog post. And so here is how the flow should go. So I've made this so that it's not actually due until Friday night. Okay. So what I want you to do is get your initial post onto the discussion forum, and I want you to be able to then go back and edit it. So the first thing would be to come in there and do a definition of right here to define what imagined social relationships are and how they work. So just write a paragraph about that. And again, each group has to do this, and this is a way to kind of just get things going. And then once or twice, you can come back to your post and edit it. So add more as you get more of your research done on the celebrities that you are following. And these are the type of things I want you to point out. So point out examples of how social media is enabling the imaginary relationship. So in this case, you really have to pay attention to how are fans engaging with this celebrity. Is this celebrity actually replying to some of the remarks people are making on social media? Do you think that this celebrity is even the one doing it? So some of the really big celebrities hire firms to conduct their social media campaigns. So do you think this person is actually doing it or not? What are the fans talking about in the relationship to this person? And I also want you to start thinking about more of social media strategically. So what are the different strategies of each celebrity? And this is one of the reasons why I want you to use more than one celebrity, so you can compare how celebrity X versus celebrity Y are doing things. And it probably in part has to do with what they're known for, what their business is. I mean, some people have to make money basically driving, using social media to drive people to a product that they're trying to sell, or like the Kardashians do to promote certain products. Whereas, I don't know, someone like Harrison Ford is on social media, but that's not the way that he, makes his money. Okay, so I just made sure that the flow here is makes sense. So um, as I said here, by tomorrow night, Tuesday night, or Wednesday, create your post. Remember, just one post per group, saying which celebrities you're following, how you're following them. Like if you're gonna have to find out, are they Instagram, YouTube, whatever. Remember, I want you to follow them on multiple social media platforms that they're using. Um, and by that point, you should already have your social media, imaginary social relationship essay definitions in there. Um, and the idea is to certainly not several times a day, but update it as you go. So just go back to the post, and you can hit edit and put more of your research. So you can say, well, I've been watching so and so for a day now, and here's some trends that I see. Take some screen captures, so you can take a screen capture and save it as a photo, and then in the research or in the discussion forum, you can upload photos. I mean, you can also just like right click on a photo on a website, but really what I'd rather get is the actual view of a tweet or Instagram post, so we can kind of see it within that kind of social media context. Um, Remember that you're also looking at how fans are interacting with this to whatever extent you can. So try to update it a couple times. And the idea is that by Thursday night, people are shifting more from their own research to kind of replying to other people's posts, by just saying, I follow this person too, and this is what I've noticed there, and kind of more of a discussion. Normally, what we would do is in class is you would start this research, and then by the end of the week, like I guess for us on Thursday, you would come into class and you would show us your post, and we would talk about it, and people would kind of chime in on their observations. So keep this, if this conversation kind of wraps up on Friday night or Saturday, that's fine. There's not a lot of weekend homework, or most of it, like I said, it's going to be reading, starting to read that one essay, but most of the week will work will be during the week. So kind of extend this and make some comments. And when I do the grading, I'll be looking that people in your group are making comments on other people's threads. Okay, so I saw that before there weren't two forums because so I want there to be a forum for each class section, just because it starts to get confusing when you have a whole bunch of people on one discussion forum. So if you're in the 1215 class, obviously post your research here, and then the 140 class here. So each group should have its own discussion topic. So it kind of just depends on how many people group up, as opposed to just do it by themselves. And in these you can come back and edit them, and add more to it each for whenever you want to do an update. So there should be one topic for each, and then you can make comments on each topic as you come by and see the type of research that each group is doing. And I'll make some comments in there too. And again, the description of all the stuff I just said is in here. And that's it. So send me any emails if you're confused. You don't have to tell me who's in your group. Obviously, I'll notice if someone completely drops out and doesn't do the assignment when I go to grade it. And one last thing, do not forget that this Wednesday is registration. So make sure you're prepared. All of my advisees in my section, the 140 section, you all have permission. Pretty much everyone has touched base with me. If not, just make sure you're prepared. As I told the ones who I did talk to, if you know your major, then you can be taking one or two kind of introductory to the major type courses, and the other courses would be your core. If you really don't know what your major is going to be, then obviously stick to the core. And switching back, if you do know your major, find the worksheet that says what courses you need to take at the start of the major. So send me an email if you have any questions. Take care. I'm looking forward to seeing your research, and again, I will be chiming in on the discussion forums.